What if the greatest battles of China's warring states weren't fought with swords and spears, but with whispers and wedding vows? Welcome back to the History Atlas. We uncover how the Qin Dynasty didn't just conquer with brute force, but strategically dismantled rival empires from the inside out through cunning diplomacy, orchestrated betrayals, and even unlikely marriages. This isn't just history. It's a masterclass in power. For centuries, our understanding of ancient China's unification under the Qin has been dominated by accounts of formidable armies, iron discipline, and relentless military campaigns. We envision vast legions clashing on blood-soaked fields, the thunder of cavalry determining the fate of kingdoms. Yet, such a singular focus obscures a far more intricate, indeed, a more profound truth. The Warring States period, an era of unprecedented violence and transformative change, was equally defined by an unseen struggle. A relentless contest waged in opulent courts, whispered in shadow-filled chambers, and sealed with the most solemn of vows. It was here, in the subtle, often ruthless, art of statecraft, that the foundations of Qin's ultimate triumph were truly laid. To comprehend the full measure of Qin's ascendancy, we must look beyond the gleaming armor and the clamor of battle, for the most decisive victories were often achieved not by conquest, but by cunning and coercion. The period spanning from 475 to 221 BCE, known as the Warring States, was not merely an era of incessant military conflict. It was a crucible of ambition, a relentless test of political will, where the very survival of states hung precariously. Imagine a vast geopolitical chessboard upon which 7 major powers, Qi, Chu, Yan, Han, Zhao, Wei, and the ascendant Qin, moved their pieces with brutal calculation. Each possessed formidable armies, distinct cultures, and unwavering aspirations for dominance. The ultimate prize for this existential contest was nothing less than the unification of all under heaven, a singular imperial dominion over what would become China. Survival itself demanded not only martial prowess, but a profound understanding of the intricate web of alliances and antagonisms that silently shaped the era. While armies clashed, the true, silent war was often fought in council chambers and diplomatic courts. This was an age where intellectual combat could prove more decisive than any chariot charge. The narrative focus, therefore, must shift from the generals and their legions to the unsung architects of statecraft, the strategists, the eloquent scholars, and the cunning diplomats who wielded influence not with swords, but with words, promises, and precisely placed whispers. Their insights, often derived from the rich intellectual ferment of the 100 schools of thought, transformed abstract philosophy into actionable state policy, forging alliances, inciting betrayals, and laying the groundwork for empires. Political survival was paramount, and the keenest minds, not always the strongest arms, dictated destiny. This era marked a profound transition in warfare, where the mastery of political maneuvering became the definitive weapon. The relentless grind of incessant warfare and the constant threat of annihilation fostered a new breed of power brokers in the warring states. These were not generals clad in armor, but intellectuals, scholars, and persuaders known collectively as the Zhongheng, often translated as the School of Diplomacy or Vertical and Horizontal Alliance School. They moved across the fractured landscape, offering their formidable intellects and counsel not to a single state, but to any ruler astute enough to recognize their value. Their primary tools were not the sword and shield, but a profound understanding of human psychology, an unparalleled mastery of persuasive rhetoric, and an almost prophetic grasp of strategic thought. They were, in essence, master manipulators of political will, capable of dissecting the ambitions and fears of monarchs and ministers alike, then reassembling them into arguments that could dictate the very fate of nations. It was through their counsel that the very concept of grand strategy evolved beyond mere battlefield tactics. Two opposing diplomatic philosophies emerged, destined to define the era and determine the survival of states. First, the Vertical Alliance, or Hezong, a strategy advocating for states to unite in a north-south axis to collectively resist the burgeoning power of Qin. Second, the Horizontal Alliance, or Lianheng, Qin's counter-strategy, which sought to forge individual pacts with states on an east-west axis, isolating and conquering rivals one by one. The grand stage was set for a monumental contest of minds, spearheaded by legendary figures such as Su Qin, the architect of the Vertical Alliance, and Zhang Yi, the astute chancellor who championed Qin's horizontal strategy. Their strategic dance would prove more consequential than any single military campaign, for it was in their words that empires would rise and fall. As Qin's shadow lengthened from the west, casting a chill over the established order, a visionary strategy emerged from the crucible of necessity. The Vertical Alliance, or Hezong. This was not merely a loose confederation, but an ambitious pact, conceived to erect a collective bulwark against the rising dragon of Qin. Its architect was Su Qin, a diplomat whose intellect was as sharp as any blade and whose oratorical power could sway the hearts of kings. His mission: to bind together the other 6 major states, Zhu, Qi, Tang, Han, Zhao, Wei, and Yan, into a formidable north-south axis, ensuring collective security against a common, overwhelming enemy. Su Qin's persuasive prowess was legendary. Traversing the courts of these disparate rulers, he articulated a compelling, stark truth. Standing alone, each state was merely an isolated morsel for Qin's insatiable ambition. He painted vivid pictures of their inevitable subjugation if they failed to unite, contrasting this grim prospect with the immense, unassailable strength of a united front. His arguments resonated, appealing to their self-preservation and their shared desire to maintain their ancestral territories and sovereignty. For a period, he succeeded in forging this grand alliance, establishing a temporary equilibrium that halted Qin's relentless eastward expansion. It was a monumental achievement, a testament to the power of words over weapons, creating a fragile wall of unity against an implacable foe. Yet, the very nature of such a vast coalition contained the seeds of its undoing. While the Hezong offered the promise of collective security, its strength was inherently limited by the enduring rivalries and mutual suspicions among its members. Each state harbored its own distinct geopolitical interests. Some bordered Qin directly and bore the brunt of its aggression, while others were more geographically distant and thus less immediately threatened. These conflicting self-interests, coupled with the inherent difficulty of maintaining a unified military and diplomatic policy across 6 independent courts, ensured that the Hezong was always a delicate balance, perpetually on the verge of collapse. It was a strategic marvel, but ultimately a temporary reprieve, vulnerable to the internal fissures that Qin's counter-strategies would soon exploit. Where Su Qin had striven to forge a bulwark of collective resistance, binding states in a desperate act of unity, Qin's counter-strategy, the horizontal alliance, or Lianheng, was designed not to unite, but to systematically unravel. This was not a philosophy of shared strength, but a pragmatic calculation of individual weakness masterfully exploited. At its core, Lianheng sought to persuade individual states to abandon the collective front and forge bilateral agreements with Qin. These pacts often involved tempting promises of land, strategic advantage against a local rival, or even prestigious royal marriages, all juxtaposed with the stark, undeniable threat of Qin's formidable military might should they refuse. The chief architect of this strategic dissolution was Zhang Yi, a master diplomat and, crucially, Qin's chancellor. Often seen as Su Qin's direct rival, Zhang Yi operated with a cold, calculating precision that stands in stark contrast to Su Qin's more aspirational, though equally cunning, appeals to collective security. Zhang Yi's genius lay in his ruthless pragmatism. He understood that self-interest, fear, and distrust were far more potent levers than any fragile ideal of solidarity. His diplomatic missions were a masterclass in psychological warfare. He would travel between states, presenting tailored arguments, subtly planting seeds of doubt about the loyalty of other Hezong members, emphasizing the futility of resisting Qin alone, and dangling the lure of territory seized from a former ally. The narrative he wove was one of inevitable Qin dominance, making collaboration, or at least neutrality, seem the only sensible path to survival, even prosperity. This constant, insidious chipping away at the Hezong alliance transformed the geopolitical landscape into a true battle of wits. Su Qin tirelessly sought to mend the ruptures, but Zhang Yi, with Qin's immense resources, strategic patience, and unwavering resolve behind him, was a relentless force of fragmentation. He efficiently broke trust where it existed, widened existing fissures, and exploited every ambition and every fear. His successes isolated states, turning former allies into wary neighbors, and then into vulnerable targets. The ultimate consequence was the systematic exposure of each state, one by one, to Qin's military incursions, which now faced a fractured, disheartened, and strategically outmaneuvered opposition. The clang of steel and the roar of armies defined one aspect of the warring states, yet an equally profound conflict unfolded in the shadows, a silent war waged with whispers, deception, and the chilling finality of a poisoned cup. This was the realm of espionage, a clandestine battlefield where empires were not merely conquered, but meticulously undermined from within. Every state employed spies, agents provocateurs, and assassins. Yet, Qin, with its methodical ruthlessness, elevated these arts to a strategic doctrine. It was not enough to defeat an enemy on the field. They must first be rendered weak, divided, and psychologically vulnerable. Qin excelled at exploiting the existing fissures within rival courts, the petty rivalries among ministers, the personal weaknesses of rulers, the simmering resentments of factions. A well-placed rumor, a fabricated document, or a strategically orchestrated betrayal could unravel years of diplomatic effort and turn allies into bitter foes. Consider the tragic case of Han Feizi, one of China's most brilliant legalist philosophers, whose insights advocated for a strong, centralized state, principles Qin itself embraced. Hailing from the state of Han, his genius was undeniable. King Zheng of Qin, later Qin Shi Huang, recognized his brilliance and invited him to his court. However, Han Fei's arrival posed a significant threat to Qin's powerful chancellor, Li Si, ironically, a former fellow student under the revered Zunzi. Fearing Han Fei's superior intellect and potential influence, Li Si, driven by ambition and self-preservation, slandered him to King Zheng. The consequence was swift and brutal. Han Fei was imprisoned and, under duress, took his own life, or was poisoned, his intellectual prowess eliminated before it could challenge the established order. This incident starkly illustrates Qin's chilling pragmatism and willingness to eliminate even unparalleled genius if it threatened the established power structure. Such covert operations extended beyond political purges. They encompassed the systematic gathering of crucial intelligence, the dissemination of damaging rumors to erode public confidence, and the targeted elimination of key figures whose presence maintained cohesion or provided strategic counsel to enemy states. The moral ambiguities were profound, yet the strategic gains were undeniable. In this realm of shadows, loyalty was a negotiable commodity, and the unseen forces at play often dictated the fate of nations more certainly than any military campaign. It was here, in the subtle ways empires crumbled from within, that Qin forged its path to ultimate dominion. While armies clashed and strategists plotted, another profound instrument of statecraft operated quietly, yet with immense power: the strategic marriage. These royal unions were rarely born of affection, but of meticulous political calculation. Their purpose was multifaceted: to secure temporary truces, semer crucial alliances, gain invaluable intelligence through the royal consort, and neutralize potentially hostile borderlands by weaving families together. However nominally, they were ties that, even if thin, could delay or divert military conflict, allowing states like Qin to focus their resources elsewhere. Yet, within this grand geopolitical game, individuals bore the heaviest burden. For royal women, often princesses, these were not love stories but profound acts of sacrifice. They were moved as pieces on a grand chessboard, their personal desires utterly subservient to dynastic ambition, their futures irrevocably bound by treaties and power plays. Imagine the young princess, torn from her homeland, married into a rival court, a living symbol of a fragile pact, carrying the weight of her state's security on her slender shoulders. Her existence was a testament to the cold calculation of power. A well-placed princess, married into a rival court, could indeed be worth 1,000 soldiers. She often served as a subtle conduit for vital intelligence, influencing court decisions through proximity, or fostering pro-Qin sentiment within an enemy state simply by her presence and allegiance. Her offspring became a complex entanglement of loyalty that could complicate any immediate military action against her birth state. The state of Qin, with its characteristic ruthlessness and foresight, regularly employed such marital diplomacy. Unions between Qin and states like Chu or Zhao were not uncommon. The strategic marriage of a Qin princess to a Chu ruler, for instance, could stabilize that volatile southern border, allowing Qin to consolidate gains in the west or east. Conversely, a princess from a vanquished state marrying into the Qin royal family became a visible symbol of submission and assimilation. Thus, behind the silken robes and ceremonial vows lay a stark duality: the profound personal cost of a life dictated by duty, yielding immense geopolitical gain. These strategic alliances, forged in the crucible of matrimony, quietly yet fundamentally reshaped the landscape of the warring states, proving that intimacy, however forced, could be a formidable instrument of power. By the era of King Zheng, who would soon command the unified realm as Qin Shi Huang, the state of Qin had perfected an art of statecraft, honed over generations. Their ascendancy was not merely the product of a superior army, formidable though it was. It was the inevitable culmination of a relentless, sophisticated diplomatic strategy that systematically dismantled their rivals. The horizontal alliance, Lian-Heng principle, first championed by Zhang Yi, became Qin's enduring doctrine: to isolate, to bribe, to threaten, and ultimately, to conquer. This patient, multifaceted approach formed the bedrock upon which Qin's successful unification campaigns were built. Through a meticulous combination of tactics, Qin systematically eroded the foundations of its adversaries. We observed how espionage exploited existing internal divisions, transforming court rivalries into catastrophic vulnerabilities. Strategic marriages, often cloaked in temporary peace, secured borders, garnered intelligence, and subtly shifted allegiances within enemy courts. Promises of land or prestige, deftly offered, seduced states away from fragile alliances, breaking the vertical alliance before it could consolidate. Each diplomatic victory, each broken pact, each compromised minister, effectively reduced the number of costly, protracted battles Qin's legions would have to fight. The 6 rival states, Han, Zhao, Wei, Chu, Yan, and Qi, fell not in a single, overwhelming military wave, but through a patient, calculated sequence of diplomatic maneuvers that isolated them, rendered them friendless, and softened them for the final military blow. Qin's triumph, therefore, represents a masterclass in long-term strategic brilliance and patient execution, where the battlefield was often merely the final act of a war already won through whispers, calculations, and the silent, relentless force of statecraft. The unification of China under the Qin was more than a military victory. It was a masterclass in statecraft, a profound geopolitical blueprint whose echoes resonated for millennia. Succeeding dynasties, from the Han to the Qing, inherited and refined these sophisticated diplomatic and espionage tactics. They navigated complex tributary systems, managed internal power struggles, and projected influence through a delicate balance of military might, economic inducement, and strategic alliances, much in the vein of the Lianheng strategy. The lessons of the warring states, the necessity of forming alliances, the efficacy of exploiting divisions, the subtle power of soft diplomacy, and the critical importance of information remain remarkably pertinent. Today, in our own global landscape, we observe these ancient principles playing out with startling clarity. Nations form multilateral blocs and bilateral agreements, striving for collective security or leveraging individual advantage, reminiscent of the Hezong and Lianheng patterns. The strategic deployment of economic power, cultural influence, and advanced intelligence operations are but modern iterations of the whispers and wedding vows that once reshaped a continent. Indeed, the true battles, as we first suggested, are often fought not on a grand field, but within the intricate webs of diplomacy, in the calculated vow, the carefully placed agent, and the strategic distribution of information. This profound history compels us to consider: how are these timeless dynamics of power and influence manifesting in our world now? The enduring art of diplomacy, with its unseen forces and strategic cunning, continues to write the chapters of human destiny, proving that the most profound victories are often won not by force alone, but by the relentless, patient manipulation of will and circumstance. If you found this journey through ancient strategy compelling, subscribe to our channel to relive these epic pages of history.